Hey everyone, welcome to episode 226 of 15 with Andy, Randy, and Jeff. Now, I know I've been obsessed about the weather lately, but when you get this close to fall in Florida and are granted a few days of reprieve from the oppression that is the summer sun, heat, and humidity in the Sunshine State, it has a tendency to get you a bit excited. Now, that said, the rain and heat, well, it's back, at least for a little while longer, while we continue to march ahead knowing our time is soon to come. And as just before we pressed record here, Jeff is like, hey, I think, we're having some lightning storms and some thunderstorms. So if you hear that in the background, just know that that is life in, well, I guess is it fall yet, technically? Did we
Getting
start?
there?
It's close. Yeah. It's close, but that's still the norm for Florida here this time of year. We are starting without Andy today. We hope that he can make it and jump in to the conversation. But if not, this is when we had to do it today. Schedules, as always, seem to get crazier and crazier. So I'm actually at the office at Duck Duck Productions. And so we cobbled some gear together. We don't have our studio done yet, but I said, if we're going to get it done this week, and I need to talk to Jeff and or Andy to talk through this. And so if it's now or never. So here we go. If it sounds a little bit different, we're just in a different place than normal. So this past weekend was gathered at the table and it was communion. And I was thinking in my head during the week leading up to last week, this was our second virtual communion during COVID. Why do we need a sermon on a communion week? Growing up, I remember a lot of pomp and circumstance, the front of the church and the table that was always there, but it was really only used for something other than flowers on communion Sabbaths. White linen covering the silver trays of juice and crackers with little crosses on the top of the lids, which was the only place in any Adventist church I grew up in and around that actually had a physical cross anywhere in the building. And the folding of the linens, much like the folding of an American flag, once we were, opening and uncovering, getting ready for passing out of the juice and the crackers. And of course, quiet and reverence led to the feeling that this was more holy than maybe most Sabbaths, maybe most holy. And if you grew up Christian, communion seems pretty self-explanatory. I mean, once the usual scriptures are read and about the Last Supper and the seemingly scripted prayers that go with them, because we kind of pray for the same things. Not that that's necessarily bad. So Andy started the message with the idea that we may well be wondering, why do we need to continue discussing? And let's just get down to business. Let's just do what we came for. Let's do this communion. But, I often thought about this growing up, and I've heard people ask this that aren't Christian or maybe were Christian and never maybe took the time to think about it on a deeper level. In a way, isn't communion just like ancient liturgy or another biblical feast type event that really doesn't have any direct impact on our lives? Maybe even less on those who don't participate? Or is this something that really we need to do and we really need to think about, Jeff? What do you think?
Yeah, as you jogged my mind, because I do remember growing up in a very similar church. Of course, you and I both grew up in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And it was actually, as I thought about it, it was actually kind of an exciting thing for me, because as I looked at it, it was that time that was different than all of the other times. It kind of broke up the time that you had, and I always looked at communion Sabbath for those of us that a lot of people's there's a communion maybe every Sunday for some churches.
Yeah, that's true.
And then there's a communion that happens, in a sense, Jesus says, as often as you eat and as you, in other words, every meal you should think about me, which is where we get the blessing from,
right. Yeah.
We offer a blessing before a meal, which kind of comes from that. But those of us that, make it a little more sporadic in terms of it being not every weekend when you come to worship. But I think that there is a side to this that creates within us a sense of longing because communion really does promote all of these things, but they're all symbols, right? They're all pieces to what Christ would really want us to look forward to. So in a sense, it creates this longing of once in a, we have a little tiny piece of bread. We have a little cup of, it's just these little tiny things that are going on. But, and I remember that, as I got older, I'm thinking, man alive, how come they don't give us a meal here, But
I want to rip it off the loaf like I see in the pictures, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it creates this longing. These symbols create that longing for a deeper, richer communion with God. So I think in that respect, yes, it is symbolic in a way, but and it's maybe commemorative in a way, but it really points us forward to something that we would, really want to hope would come soon.
I like that because, past just like you said, liturgy or a feast type event that seems maybe outdated, but also it seems to me like, at least in Adventism and maybe more so, I think it's still around, but symbolism has always seemed like a slippery slope in our denomination because, what symbolism is honoring and worshiping versus what's worshiping the process or the symbol itself. There's not a big, it seems like crosses aren't a big thing in Adventism per se, certainly not in anything that would be like jewelry wise or things like that. Whereas I just always found it odd that on the trays that this was a symbol that we used, and it's not inappropriate. Of course, it's a cross, and it reminds us of, what this supper and what this meal and what this is all about. It just seems like it's a weird kind of a slippery slope. How do we view or prepare ourselves for participating, knowing that it is symbolic, but how do we find that deeper meaning if this is just like, if we're new to this, or maybe it's just never clicked? Because for a long time with me, it didn't. That it was just, it's more, but it seems like it's hard to plug into that when we're so worried sometimes about symbolism and what are we worshiping?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Randy. I don't think we can ever get away from symbolism as much as, that's just going to, literally think about it. Your name is a symbol.
Of course.
So we're always going to have symbols. You're right. They can become those things that we protect and we cherish and we follow as opposed to what they represent. You're absolutely right. But I don't think that, first of all, when Andy was speaking, I wish I wish he was here. I think he would speak to this. Is when we, even in this ritual that we call it, or a sacrament, many people call it, and obviously some people in Christianity look at symbols as, that was so hard because in the very beginning, the reason why it got transferred over to this is the real body of Christ, or this is the real, is because there were those that had a difficult time with it being a symbol of his body, so to speak. But I think the real piece to this is the fact that the reality of it is that we should be desiring this just as much as our bodies would need a real meal. Which kind of brought in what Andy was speaking about on last Sabbath, is where he was talking about the fact that the meal got turned into just a place for people to gorge themselves or, prohibit other people from there was just different things that it took place in the commonness of meal. But I think you're right. I think that we need to realize that sometimes as symbols can get passed off real quickly as, oh, that's just a symbol.
Yeah.
The realness of it should be in terms of how much does this sacrament or this ability to find a tradition in my life that means something to me. And I think that's how we have to look at it. Much like, we have the supper table, the meal itself is not just a place for us to come and get nourishment. That's not the only reason we gather around the table. There's a kind of a good tradition or a good ritual, in a sense, that brings a family together around a meal, and that's a good thing. And I think as a church, we need to realize how much this quote symbol actually does for us as a community, and does for us each individually too. It creates that ability to see that not only do I get a chance to look forward to finally meeting God in heaven and sitting at that table, but it also, in the meantime, we have this beautiful of being able to have communion with each other and with, as God asks us to do. I think we can't overemphasize it, and we shouldn't underemphasize it either. I mean, we have to really truly see it for what it is. It's Jesus saying, "Do this." Don't make a religious worship. In other words, we don't worship the sacrament, and sometimes we get into arguments about it. It's just ridiculous. When actually what he's just saying, he's just saying to us, hey, you guys, you're going to be your best support. Right. You're going to be the ones that, do this together and make it. And that's what Paul's talking about. He says, don't create this into a place for you to, just be greedy and gluttonous and exclude and blah, blah, blah. So
yeah, I like that part that Andy outlined, because Paul gives that warning about, these abuses that were taking place, and, during in their community, during that communion agape feast, they were sharing and serving each other from the plenty of some, but then still leaving others with the scarcity, which, I would suggest that maybe a warming of the heart is what we need to set goals of love and acceptance and care with this. Because, I mean, if we're parlaying this, or we're realizing that this is, again, a symbol, but this is an inclusion, not just into this 15, 20, 30 minutes that we may spend however many times a year together corporately or in COVID virtually.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that applying this to all the things in our world that are, these injustices that just seemingly now happen on a weekly, sometimes daily basis, they're so prevalent. And it seems like sometimes this is so big and so insurmountable that it's just easier to quit than to continue to try to move forward or struggle to be better or push for change. When he's coming down in this warning, he's just saying, be nice to each other, share what you have, and make sure that you aren't, like at the Last Supper, make sure that you're not fighting for who's going to sit at Jesus' right hand. And don't be so proud that you're not going to be the one that is going to refuse. Like, if I don't look up and I don't say anything, maybe Jesus won't pick me to help him wash feet. Right. Or,
that's really, really good, Randy. When you say that, there was a real switch. There's a transition going on, because if you remember, they were, Jesus' Bible and the disciples' Bible was the Old Testament. They didn't have the New Testament. Like, there was no directive for, other than the fact that of the Old Testament that they had for coming together and being together, and what was going on in their world. I mean, we think about what's going on in our world today, but what was going on in their world was a transition from this tribal mentality of everybody is together, and there was this movement. Well, it's not just a movement. I mean, empires upon empires were starting to, and you had cities that were, even Jerusalem. We think of Jerusalem as being this nice Jewish town, but there was a lot of different citizens in Jerusalem, and so there was this idea that I come to. And it may not be as homogeneous as I thought it would be, so to speak. There's a lot of people in the church. And so Paul's writing to this group of people who have found somewhat what we would call individualization, And so now people are coming to the table with lots of different ideas about who's sitting across from me. And Jesus knew that was going to happen when he gave this to the disciples. He knew that this was coming, when there were going to be people coming into his church that didn't look, didn't act, and didn't even speak the same way as, the rest of them. And so this individualization was going to start making fragments within the church. And so this
Absolutely.
was his way of saying, no, 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 no. Allow this meal to be shared with everyone, because that's the opportunity for you to come together in my name, so to speak.
Well, I just saw so many comparisons to what I think we're going through today and the struggles, and they're not really, like you just pointed out, they're really not that much different than what they were experiencing. And just the fact that if we can practice coming together on this, then maybe it makes it easier for us to come together on other things. I mean, I know right now you can't have it's almost impossible to have a civil conversation about politics. I mean, of course, we're closing in on the November elections. We got debates. I think
here we go.
I think it comes up tonight. Social injustices and, police brutality, all these things, racism, and everyone has a different life experience. And I'm not trying to throw shade on a left side, a right side, a center side, but everyone has a life experience that molds the way they see things, the way they think. And it's not necessarily from a point of being right or wrong, vindictive or otherwise, but when that ire is up, and I just picture the disciples going, because I know it would be me too. I would just I'm looking at the table. Nope, I'm not looking left. I'm not looking right. I can see Jesus out of my peripheral. He's grabbed. Oh no, he's not gonna do that. No, but I don't want to acknowledge it because it's not happening. And then like the teacher when you were a kid in class, if I don't look, they're not gonna pick on me. And it just really hit me that this is such an opportunity for us to be so embracing and so inviting to the outside. And I thought something that Andy said about foot washing. And I thought, as a kid, I hated that. It's like, oh, I don't want to take my shoes off for somebody, that's kind of gross. And I don't want to wash somebody else's feet. I mean, what if they didn't take a shower? And I'm not a germaphobe or anything, but I always thought it was kind of gross. And the more I've grown and the old, maybe it's the older I get, you really see that as such a beautiful thing. And it's such if you have the ability to invite somebody to do that, who's maybe never done it before, or maybe was like me as a kid, they're still uncomfortable with it. And it really makes you feel like, oh, I'm a part of this and I'm willing to serve you. And I think it immediately pulls the other person's guard down. And then there's opportunities for friendship. There's opportunities for community. There's opportunities to serve each other that are all of a sudden opened up because of one act. And I'm like, how brilliant was Jesus? I mean, I'm uncomfortable and we have running water and we shower on the regular and all this kind of thing. Let me think about then, it would have been a servant that would have done this. And it really starts to hit home what he was trying to teach, because when I grew up, only baptized members were encouraged to participate in communion, like a rite of passage, like a club. And I never felt like that was a welcoming thing, where I feel like the way we've done the communion at Whole Life Church has been so much fun. Even, I mean, I hate I don't want to use the word fun because it sounds whimsical maybe, but I think it can be fun. It can be rewarding, and it can really make you feel like you are a part of something. And I thought that about the foot washing when Andy mentioned it this week. And I thought, how could something that has been so weird to me before now seem like, man, I wish we were together, because you know what I really missed? I miss foot washing. I don't, maybe is that weird? I don't know.
No, I think I think what you've done is you obviously have grown in your repulsion, right? I mean, you've started, started to realize, hey, this actually is something that brings us all together.
Yeah.
And I think that's literally, I mean, what he did. He put himself in a place of a servant. And when he did that, he automatically helped them understand what it means to come to the same level together.
Yeah.
Because he didn't elevate himself. It's hard to go up, but you can certainly bring yourself down to a servant, which in a sense brings everybody to the point where, ooh, I could do that. I could be a part of that. And he also didn't say to us to take this haphazardly either. I mean, it was, I don't know if I want to use the word fun, but in a sense, it was something that was needed, and it was something that was a part of their normal everyday working of drinking something and eating something. But he provides meaning to it. So while you're doing it, you're not just thinking about yourself. You're realizing what you're taking has some significance outside of you, right?
I think the word I'm looking for was enjoyable instead of fun.
Yeah.
Because I think it is more enjoyable when you do it with someone, that you offer it up. And even if it's a little uncomfortable, if you go through that process together, I think you just can't help but, make it some kind of connection. And I think that's the better and more meaningful connections that we make as even a church community is so beneficial for us in teaching the gospel and just living out the gospel. I think it's such a basic thing, and yet it can be so powerful because you don't have to know anything. You don't have to know any Bible. You don't have to be able to recite anything. You don't have to know doctrine. All you have to do is be able to bend down and wash somebody's feet. And I think that act of kindness can be so much more because there's nothing else attached to it, seemingly. I invite you. I didn't ask you for anything else. I don't ask you what you know. We don't have to have a conversation that's anything more than, just kind of getting to know someone. So I think, communion might be something that maybe we should do a little bit more often. I don't know. Maybe it should be something that we really look as a way for us even to invite others into this life that's just, super non-confrontational. I just never thought about it like that until this week.
Yeah, and there shouldn't be any resistance because the fact is, we all have different talents.
Sure.
But and some of us, have different talents to do different things, whether it's music or preaching or teaching or whatever. But all of us can serve.
Absolutely.
All of us can do that. So,
and I loved, as we start to wrap it up here, I loved how Andy used John 14, 1-3. And maybe one of my favorite promises in the Bible that comes directly from Jesus. And he said, "Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. There's more than enough room in my Father's home. If this were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. And you know the way to where I am going." Now, I know this last little part there created a little bit of confusion for the disciples, but for that promise for us now and having the whole story, I don't know if there's a better promise that helps motivate us to take care of others and share this eternal inclusion. And again, just something so easy as, foot washing and sharing in this communion. It just made me think about it in a completely different way. So this week, one of our whole life takeaways asked, how integral is the concept of being a servant to communion? And, I think what we talked about today, I'd love to hear what you think about this and the way that Andy presented this message this week, and to see maybe how we could utilize and be even more intentional than we have been. I think our church does a great job with this, but maybe there's ways we can be more intentional about inviting others and to include others in communion. Maybe someday when we're all back together and we get to do this again and we can actually do the foot washing and do, and take these together because it's a special time to share. So anyway, would love to know what you think about this correlation of having service and communion, and we'd love to hear your ideas. Send a voicemail or a text to 407-967-1607 or send an email to podcast@wholelife.church. And we would love to share that with everyone else. And our final thoughts this week are from Andy's message. He said, maybe all the other stuff is greater and of lesser importance at different times, but Jesus' prayer for unity, for oneness, is a call to humility about our beliefs. Share unity and oneness with him and the Father is a call worthy of following, and in this shared table, there is unity that Jesus is the Savior, and he calls us to love, and there is a glorious future. Thought that was full of hope.
Good.
Yeah, that was really good. So, I said this last week, but, don't miss this week's message. I know sometimes we've had maybe a propensity to go, it's just communion. I don't need to tune in for that. And, please do. You can watch it at wholelife.church. You can watch it in the mobile app. you can swipe up in today's show notes and click on a link there to Speaking of Grace. That will be the message, and you can go back and listen to the message portion. That comes out every Tuesday evening, so this would be last night as you're listening to this. And next week, we have a new series. What's up with this? While We Wait. Do we know what this is about, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be kind of a new take on eschatology. And for those of you that may not use that word a whole lot.
What? You don't use eschatology every day in your speaking?
Yeah. No, actually, I don't. It's
I'm disappointed.
Yeah. But it's basically looking at how we perceive their end time events. These are end time scenarios, or these are last, when you see the guy holding the sign, the end of the world is near.
And why do I always start singing REM?
Go to that song. Right?
Yeah, right.
So when we that's basically it's a study of those events and those scenarios that bring us to the close of life as we know it, or the world as we know it.
Excellent.
So it's just a different kind of a look at it, because our church has quite a lot to say in regards to, as we think about what last days might be, because we've always kind of prided ourselves. A lot of theologians have said, well, we're the church for the end time. But I think a lot of churches feel that way. I guess they wouldn't be here, right? But looking at eschatology, studying end time events, and maybe having a different perspective. So that's what this is about.
Well, in 2020, is there anything more appropriate than studying end time events?
Exactly.
At least seemingly, it seems like it's a good match.
What's even funnier is the fact that the disciples, after Jesus left, felt like they were living in the last days. So this is 2,000 years ago.
And I was like saying, here we are 2,000 years later, and we're still thinking the same thing. But excellent. All right, well, that'll be good. And the first message it's entitled Abraham. So it sounds like we're starting at the beginning.
I mean, we gotta go from the beginning of what we look at as our forefathers,
beginning to the end. So maybe next week I need some really dramatic music to change on the podcast. So we can pump it up.
Some ominous,
yes,
theme songs.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you joining in today. And Andy, we missed you, and we'll catch up with you next week. And that's going to do it for this week. So again, if you missed it, go back and check out the message. The easiest way to do that is just swipe up in today's show notes, and you'll find the link to Speaking of Grace. Subscribe, and then you'll never miss a message every Tuesday evening. And of course, join us again next Wednesday morning for episode 227. Thanks for listening, guys, and have a great week.